welcome everyone to my talk. I will be talking about accessibility. The clock is ticking, and this is meant to invoke a little bit of urgency in your efforts of making your app completely accessible. And I hope it will work. And if not, the next couple of slides maybe will. So my name is Bruno Scheele. I'm a freelance iOS developer. I'm currently doing a job at ABN, where I'm mainly focused on helping getting their app accessible, and do this by being in a team and handling most of their accessibility issues, and by being part of the Accessibility Guild, which focuses on helping others solve their accessibility issues. And to summarize my talk very, very shortly, I will be talking about four things. First off, legislation. This is why you should be worried. Then, once you are sufficiently worried, I want to get you started. I want to be able to help people get their app accessible. But once you start getting your app accessible, there are a lot of common pitfalls that you are handling. You're solving all the easy ones, and then comes the hard part. And after that, once you think, I'm getting serious, no, then you can still get even more serious. And I will be discussing that. So first off, legislation. I am the law. Or in this case, the European Accessibility Act is the law. So the European Union likes to be very helpful to all its citizens, every citizen in all the countries. And part of that is the European Accessibility Act. That means that they want to remove all digital barriers for people with disabilities, which is a great goal. It's a lofty goal. And this got started in 2019, when all government and semi-government organizations were starting to be obliged to become accessible. This is why you see all of your taxes and tax websites and municipal websites slowly adding, how you call it, speaker icons so that you can read everything aloud, and everything is becoming slowly more accessible. Now, this is all great, but next year, in June, it will become into effect for the next phase. And the next phase means financial institutions, insurance companies, and very large companies, and maybe even medium-sized companies. So that is, for many of us, probably the scary part. I think I saw how big is Dr. Lip. Yep, they probably fall under this too, so that will be interesting. But it's coming, and we're not sure how it's going to be enforced. Considering EU, it'll probably take a while, but it's best to be ready beforehand instead of having someone behind you breathing down your neck. And this involves every digital interaction that the people might have. This goes from apps to websites to intranets, to getting money from the wall. There's a digital device over there, so even that has to be accessible. Everything counts. So, and just to emphasize, June 2025, that's only 8 months away. Especially for the large companies that this is targeting, 8 months is nothing. So let's get started. Yes. Now, how do you comply to this act? I'm not going to do all the legal jargon. This is why you have legal departments. They can handle all that stuff. But very basically, your app should should follow the WCAG, as they like to call it, and specifically the 2.2 version, which is the most recent current version, at the AA level, which is not the highest, but it's not the most basic level either. So, sadly, that's all very web-based. So there's web guidelines with stuff like links and pop-ups and side panels and all the stuff that we don't care about. But it mostly operates in 4 categories, which I'm mentioning here: how people see things, how people operate on things. Is it understandable? This is more often with language and what kind of words are you using? And is it robust? Does it stand up against changes in resolution, in landscape orientation? All those things are mentioned. And thankfully, these are still web guidelines, but they're sort of adjusted for mobile and for mobile native apps. So some of them don't count, but not really a lot of them, so you might as well just try to follow all of them. Thankfully, there's a 3.0 coming up. Not sure how long that will take, but that one does actually have native app guidelines, which will make our lives a lot easier. So, and how do you actually, according to Dutch law, make sure that you comply with the law? Is providing documentation. This is all still self-regulated, so you have to promise, pinky swear, that your app is accessible. You can decide that with an app rating, accessibility rating, from A to F, and only the A to C is valid. And for example, having Dr. Lip as an example, each of your apps, for example, could have its accessibility rating. And then each of the websites, if you have them, would also have their own accessibility rating. And you can probably also distinguish between Android and iOS if you want. So you have to prove this. How do you prove this? Well, you have to hand over all the documentation on the actual audit that you either did yourself or you had done by someone else. And you have to provide like documentation. Okay, what's my progress going to be that ensures we are improving upon our accessibility level? Each level has a different, how do you call it, condition that says, okay, within a year I'm moving up one level, or I'm actually staying on the same level or going below it. So it's interesting. Getting started. So how do you get started with going accessible for your app? Well, the first easy one is just getting started yourself. You all have phones. Your phones have all kinds of fancy settings, and you can try out those settings. Nearly 50% of all people have at least one setting enabled. And very often this is either dark mode or just text size, but you also have bold text, you also have zoom. There's also high contrast settings, reduce motion settings, do not autoplay animation settings. There's all kinds of settings that you can try out yourself. And trying it out is easy. Let me get this. Yes, because you can even create an accessibility shortcut. You go to settings, you quickly type in shortcut, you'll see the accessibility shortcut, and then you see all the accessibility settings that you can put behind the shortcut. And once you triple click your home button or your side button, you get all the options that you have selected for easy access. So if you're testing, it's a nice way to save a lot of time by just immediately enabling voiceover, immediately enabling voice control, all those things. So those are your device settings. More on that later. There's one caveat. But we also have accessibility technologies. Kind of the same thing. There's accessibility settings that enable very specific accessibility technologies. This is the part that people with real disabilities are going to use a lot, that you are going to be programming for. So there's 4 big ones, which I'm going to go quickly through. So dynamic text is the most obvious one. You can see here. Let's see. Yes, it's working. You can see here our the ABN app, and we're putting the setting to 310%. And it still has to be legible. It still has to work correctly. All your elements still have to be visible properly. No squishing. It can be a lot. You can also see here that if you tap not enlarge text, it should show the large content viewer. But if you do this correctly, your app will still be very nice, even at a very large text size. So, most common issues that you encounter while doing dynamic text. A lot of apps really, really like their branding. Companies like their branding, and with their branding comes custom fonts. If you have implemented a random custom font, chances are it doesn't resize properly or at all. So take care of that. It is possible to make it sure that custom fonts resize. It's not that hard. It's just a little bit of upfront work. It doesn't introduce any very special gotchas, so it's safe. But you have to do the work. And horizontally laid elements, so buttons side to side, they are going to be very, very squished. So either your text is gone, or your button suddenly takes up half the screen, which you don't want. So you might consider stacking buttons if they are on really large text sizes, like you show here. Like you have to show 166 elements or cancel because I don't want to be here anymore. VoiceOver. Let's see, this one might be loud, so let's see if it all works. So VoiceOver, to start with, is basically that it allows you to hear your screen. I think most people are already familiar with it, or at least have heard about it. But it basically means that every element on the screen that is informative should also be spoken aloud. So that a person that is, for example, has sight issues, is in the dark, doesn't want their light on, but can make sounds, so no cinemas people, can still use their phone.
Voiceover on. ABN Investments app back button. Self-service button. Self-directed overview heading. Contract number 1234XXX. Orders 1 sent, 1 rejected, 1 current, 1 executed, 1 withdrawn, 1 expired, 1 cancellation request pending, 1 cancelled, 1 other button. Your investments are currently worth €588.52. Your result since you started investing is €2,034.00. This is a growth of 500%. Activate to change the period for which you want to see your results button. Actions available.
So you can see here, back button gets its own special case. All buttons have like the button trait. Headers get the header trait. And you can decide or not decide depending on what you want to embellish some views. Because, for example, this one is sparser visually than it is audibly, because we actually make it a sentence in the voiceover, which is either nice or not nice. I'll get back to that later. So, most common issues when you are creating things with voiceover. Lots of times people forget about the header trait. If you have anywhere some kind of text that's a little bit larger than the rest of the text because it indicates stuff below it, give it the header trait. It's important. It will fail your audit if you do not do this. And another common one is buttons. Buttons also often forget the button trait, which doesn't happen if you use native controls. But for some reason, we hate native controls. We make very fancy views and then just add an on-tap and we're done. But on-tap doesn't get the button trait. So you need to add it yourself with the accessibility add traits view modifier for SwiftUIers. And there's also link. Link replaces the button, and it's usually used when you go outside of your app or to a website or to another app. You can use link instead of button. And there's a lot more. Android has even more types of traits, which is a lot of fun. But there's a lot of things over there. So voice control. I didn't know about this one, but I've learned it's also a lot of fun. You can actually talk to your screen. It will. You can actually say tap back, tap stop, tap. What do we have here? Brunel. And then it will perform this action for you if you pronounce it correctly and if it doesn't go Siri on you. And if you want to know, yes, but how do I speak this thing that you are saying? You can actually just tell it, hey, show me all the names. And it will give you all the names that of all the controls that you can have. And if for some reason this is not enough, you can also say show numbers, and you just give every control a number, and you can just say tap 8, and it'll be fine. So, very common issues with voice control. Voice control is very specific, where VoiceOver wants to know about everything on your screen. Voice control assumes that your user is sighted enough. They just have other problems, other wishes, other needs. So what happens then is that non-interactive elements should not count. If you put them in voice control, if you see a non-interactive element being in voice control, that's wrong. Will also fail your audit. And again, this often happens when you use non-native controls, or when you try to be smart about controls. For example, lots of people have cells in their apps, and cells often are not interactive, but sometimes they have like more information button. Yes, but it's a cell, and I made all of them non-interactive. But what if I add an on-tap, and if there's no action, the on-tap is just an empty closure? Voice control knows about this and makes it immediately a proper element. So you have to actually hide this from accessibility or make sure it doesn't show up in voice control, usually by getting rid of the on-tap. Another one is people are hard at work. They finally finished all the voiceover work. It was tough, but that one view that you have with like 10 data points in there, it now has a proper sentence that's set. But this is the exact same sentence that will count as the input control label, which is horrible if you have 10 data points that are like the sentence that you have to say. Tap. Brunel weird gibberish because investment stock, which is also 138 value, and then suddenly you lose track and it's not tapping anything. So you should add shorter labels. You should have like one small, simple command that you can do, and you can put in many of them. You can have, if it's a list, you can have like item 1, Brunel, just the entire name of it. There's multiple options that you can do, and you can speak all of them. It'll be fine. They don't even have to be unique, very important. You don't have to have unique input labels all on your screen, because if it detects duplicates, it will ask the user, okay, which one do you want? Just tell me a number. Full keyboard access. There are many users that have issues using their hands. They maybe have muscle problems. Maybe they also have extreme case of RSI, when you also don't want to start typing with your finger. So they use keyboards, they use alternative big bad keyboards. There's a lot of ways that people can benefit by using full keyboard access. And full keyboard access follows many of the same rules as voice control does. You can see here, it goes through containers. And the blue thing that you see moving there is the focus. So also here, very important, non-interactive elements do not get focus. If you do that, you failed somehow. So, but hopefully, if you do the voice control one properly, this will also be a lot simpler. So, indeed, the same. Another big trap which comes with color contrast is that you saw that it's like a very light bluish tint for the focus. Sometimes that doesn't work. For example, if you have a very nice blue button or any other darker button, it will not show. It will not give enough contrast. So the user might not know it's currently focused. This will also fail your audit when you are when you're being checked, because hey, I do not see this button being selected. Yes, but it is selected. Look at it. No, you need a better focus area. And there's ways that you can do that. You can assign focus areas yourself. You can enlarge it. You can make a different color. But you need to do something about it. And what also sometimes happens is that you create keyboard traps. Especially with custom modal controls, sometimes you forget that your close button also has to be accessible. And a keyboard user will not be able to escape, which is highly annoying. You can solve this by doing the magic escape gesture. There's a actual method for that. I think it's also a view modifier on in SwiftUI, but you can perform the magic the escape gesture and tell it what to do when that happens. So we're up there. Now, next up, you should always know yourself and know your enemy. But what does this mean? Well, basically it means our own worst enemy is usually ourselves as well. Or in this case, our app is our worst enemy, especially in big companies, large teams. ABN has 12 teams on their app. Is this necessary? Probably not. Somehow they still manage to do it. So this app grows in multiple ways, multiple branches, and my team doesn't know what the other team is doing. This is completely normal. It's medium healthy. You don't want to know about everything, but you still want to know something. But there's a lot going on. So if you really want to get your app accessible, step 1, make sure your app is cataloged. Make sure you know what the purpose is of your app. What is the main purpose of your app? Are you messaging? Is this a chat app with the patients? Is this a patient record system? All those things. Is this a banking app? Do I transfer money just, or do I also get an insurance? Important things. So document your app, document your most important flows, your main flows, and most importantly also the flows that people actually use. If you accidentally made a very nice timer and now people are only using your app for the timer, also very much part of the most important flow in your app. Then actually get an audit. Get this out of the way early. Don't wait until someone decides to investigate you. But just grab a company that's preferably one that's accredited and tell them, listen, do I comply with the law? And the answer will be no. But they will very much tell you how far along you are. And they will and then you have to you will have the auditor over. You will discuss with the auditor, okay, these are the flows that I want you to check. You will ask you, are you sure these are the only flows that you want me to check? For now, yes. Which is also good. If you say for now, then they're happy because that means you'll just invite them back. And they will give you a very big report of everything that went wrong. Usually while you are well testing and you can be with their testing. So how do you get an accredited inspector? You can find them, for example, here. So there's a site called Drempelvrij, which is the site that gives a seal of approval on your website. You can also get it for the apps. And there are two organizations on there. First one is company, the other one is organization, that you can ask, can you do an audit of my app? And if they pass it, it's a proper audit. If they do not, because they are accredited organizations. If you want, main drawback of these two is that they're very web focused, so all their app knowledge is growing. And they will make very rich statements sometimes, and it's like, yeah, but that's a website thing. Oh yeah, you are correct. But if you want an app-focused audit, you can ask, for example, there's another company, organization that's called apt.org, and abra.ai is kind of the same thing. You can ask them, and they won't be an accredited company, but they will help you much more in the app specialized audits. And this will be the result. Just for context, ABN has a very large app. We were complimented on the fact that our app was so very accessible. And when they got finished and we compiled everything, we had 1,000 tickets. Now, that sounds scary, but many of them are like, oh yeah, this button is not marked as a button. Oh yeah, that's that component, okay. Make sure the component is marked as a button, okay. That's 100 tickets already, but still, it's a lot of tickets. So, get cracking. Start early, do it often. Create some kind of focus point. Maybe you just do one accessibility ticket in the first hour of the day, something like that, but try to get into a habit. And this will help a lot. So, now that you are creating your app, you're making it accessible, it's going well, and suddenly you get across an extremely annoying issue. So there's a couple of common pitfalls that happen a lot. First off, this one is very annoying. Remember the caveat I mentioned with accessibility settings? These do not count during your audit. You cannot say, yes, but if people with high contrast issues, they turn on the high contrast setting. And the auditor would like, sorry, doesn't count. And you know what has not enough contrast? The iOS native switch toggle. Yes, that was a very fun conversation. Now, thankfully, there's a lot of these that are currently not being counted, but all the W3 organizations and allied organizations that are accrediting these things have heard this, because every company is complaining about it. So they're currently dealing with this. They're currently making sure that they have some kind of ruling on this. And they're probably going to start allowing these kinds of settings to actually count during audits. So we can be happy about that. But for now, they don't count. So either find an alternative or wait until they hopefully do count, but that's a risk. All iOS developers' banes, especially if you come in later at the company, custom stuff. The designer is saying, yes, but Android and iOS have to be the same. Look, the pixels are off. And this is when you start subclassing the navigation controller, doing all kinds of weird stuff, making your body sheets different. Okay. Or, same issue. Yes, but this native bottom sheet doesn't have enough configuration power. I need more. I need to have a scale with an animation that is exactly this. No, please don't. Because then you end up with stuff like this. And it's going to show a bottom sheet. A bottom sheet is modal, as everyone knows. And I want to remind you, non-interactive stuff doesn't count.
Dynamic. User can dismiss with sticky footer button. Components, back button. Close button. Here my tail, heading, close button. Close button. Here my tail, head, close button. Toggle content height, core underscore icon far, far away, behind the sticky footer button. Dismiss pop-up. Dynamic, user can dismiss with sticky footer button. Dynamic, user can't dismiss.
This will also fail your audit. Those buttons behind that should all be disabled and non-focusable, non-interactive. But we made some kind of weird bottom sheet, and we're paying for it now. Next up, landscape. This is mandatory now. So everyone that doesn't have this into account is screwed. Now, very technically, this will pass audit, because the rule is you need to have one line of text visible completely. So, but don't tell your manager that, because this is a horrible experience for obvious reasons. So, reconsider everything that's sticky on your app. Visual changes. If something changes on your screen that is important, you must announce it. So, accessibility technologies you can focus on things, which is the nuclear option for announcing stuff, but you can also just post an announcement, which works. So if you have an important milestone, for example, while you're downloading something and it reaches 25%, if you're mentioning 25% on your screen, announce it. If you have some kind of text validation error and you're typing and it pops up the error, announce the error and you do not lose focus, it'll be fine. If you have a toast message that pops up, you announce the toast message. For example, we have here a text field
type
error.
666 error, text field. Double tap to edit. Insertion point attend. 6. 6. 6. Oh no, this is a grave error.
See? And you can see that the focus is still on the text field and everything is as the user expected, but they got a notice from, hey, I did something wrong in text field. This is very useful for them. They don't have to swipe past and then discover they did it wrong. So you can announce things. Also, a very important one. Once you get started in accessibility and you're dealing with everything, at some point you're going to think, this is weird, or this shouldn't happen, or I could probably do this better. Please don't. Whatever you're thinking of, it's our job as people that want to implement accessibility to only fill in the fields, only fill in the accessibility label, only fill in the proper traits, only fill in the proper use labels, all that stuff. And the technologies are responsible for interpreting all of that. This is basically like your browser interpreting HTML in different ways. It's not your fault, you did the HTML, it's the browser's fault. So do not try to fix them. So, for example, voice-over pronunciations. A lot of people like to fix these. And because sometimes things happen and voice-over pronounces them weirdly. Date and time often get mispronounced because it suddenly decides that 9 o'clock is 09, period 00. Okay, it's weird, but still understandable. Money often gets mispronounced. 900,000 gets pronounced as 900 euros dot 000. Dot 00. Or identifiers, IBAN numbers get, it sees a very long number and decides that should be pronounced properly, which in the case of an IBAN number is very, very bad because then you just get, what number is this? I want to hear 1234, not 1243. So, for example, here, told you about money.
You own 800 euros assets of 5% ABN/euros/201222022 that hold a total value of 891,280 euros and 0 cents. This is a 52% loss since the start of the day. The current price per asset is 111.41%. Item 5 of 5, link.
Yeah. So what happened here is we had this constantly kept getting mispronounced for some reason. We didn't figure it out. Well, we did figure it out. I'm going to tell you about it later. But it got mispronounced. So what we did to fix it, someone spent a lot of time to finding every possible way that you can pronounce this in English and Dutch. And we converted to that text. Yes, voiceover works now. Pat on back. Everyone is happy. Everyone except people that use Braille readers. So if they handle your, if a blind person handles your app with a Braille reader, suddenly that entirely pronounced string that could have been on one rule for the Braille reader, now it's like 5 lines of text, which is a horrible experience. So we don't want it. So this happens whenever you try to fix something that you think is wrong in accessibility tech. Basically, trust in people and trust that they know their technology. It is allowed for a monetary thing to be mispronounced. If someone gets annoyed by that, they can go back and listen to the entire thing again by character. This is a known habit. They know that everything gets mispronounced anyway. So this is a thing that happens. This is a thing that they do. Trust your users, trust the technology that they decide to use, and well, try to stay within the fields. And if you really must, you can do these kinds of things. You can say, hey, this one thing, make it an attribute string, add the spell out attribute. That means that it will literally spell things out, like N, L, 1, 2. It will do everything, including spaces and capitals. But again, don't mind that. Or if you have really ambiguous strings, like is that read, as in the verb, or is that this has been read? This is one of your read items. You can actually provide a speech notation if you want. This is also useful, for example, for brand names. You can find the actual speech notation for your brand names and use those wherever you mention your own brand. If you do it like this, by the way, your translators will hate you. Do not override your system language. Do not provide something in your app that says, "Oh, you can see the app in English as well, or in Dutch, or in German." No, don't do that. If you want to have that, point them to your settings, please, because if not, you're going to break everything at some point. All the times that we got our currency mispronounced, it's because we are providing an in-app language selector, which we're currently getting rid of. And there's lots more. Everything in your app counts. It's not just your own code. It's all it's the in-app webflow that you point to. It's the PDF that you allow for download. If you have a video, you should be able to pause it, make it faster, make it slower. It has to have audio captions, audio descriptions, a lot of stuff. Dynamically load content, timed content such as toasts. If they disappear, you're probably doing it wrong because those are, again, bad for people with attention deficiencies. So there's a lot of things that we think is normal, which is actually not accessible, and people are going to notice now. Everyone still with me? Good. Okay, so once you're doing all of that, and I want to emphasize, start with the easy stuff, because the easy stuff will get you like 80% of the way there. But once you are getting serious, you'll notice that being serious about accessibility is across the company. You have to create a culture. Bas in the Broek recently had a presentation on this in Swift Leads, where he actually talks about this. And I'm going to speak a little bit about this myself as well. But you have to start talking to people, basically to everyone in your company, about the need for this. Talk to your PO, your product owner. They're important. And for product owner, I also mean higher management. But make sure that you can focus on this. Make sure that you can focus a sprint on this, and preferably more sprints, because the first sprint will be slow. If you're new to this, if you're getting started, getting the hang of accessibility technologies, you'll be slow. You're going to learn a lot of stuff. You're going to learn a lot of things. You're going to decide a lot of stuff. And the next sprints will be faster and faster and faster. But you need the multiple sprints. Talk to your UX team. Accessibility should be designed from the ground up. You hear this often, and it could look a little bit like this. This is now under the definition of ready for, definition of done for designers. You need to have a lot of accessibility already baked in. So you can see here that we already create focus orders for this nice notification banner here. You go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and the close button is 5. It's the last one. But there's also an I there. That I can change to a neutral message. This is an information message. There's neutral, and there is urgent, alert, error, stuff like that. And we don't want the developer to constantly add error to this. So in the design already it says, okay, If this is an error, it should be prefixed with this localization key. If it's neutral, it should be prefixed with this. All of those things should be inside of the design already. So you can see here this, all icon buttons also fun. Your save button should also have like a save string attached to it. And all color tokens, while designers are busy making their very nice color palettes, color tokens, and see all the background stuff, convince them to also make a high contrast version while they're at it. It'll be easier if they think about it now. Backend team. What do they have to do with accessibility? Well, also a lot. For example, lots of apps use some kind of dynamic content. Not because iOS developers, app developers are lazy, but because there's a lot of stuff that changes constantly, especially if marketing is involved. Marketing often has like their own CMS system that converts stuff to some kind of HTML and then just pumps it. And it used to be fine. Okay, we have this kind of web view and looks kind of like our app. It's fine. But now it's not anymore, because if you use the web view, then maybe it'll be kind of fine, but some people just use a lot of text, and then you have 5 paragraphs of text in one view, which should have been broken up into 5 pieces of text, 1 for each paragraph, 1 for each item in a bulleted list. All those things. So start making agreements with backends. Start ensuring, okay, if you're going to use HTML, yes, please keep it to the easy part. We can parse this. We can create blocks of this. You can also go full server-driven UI. Tom, if you grab him after his talk, he can talk to you more about that. And also when for example, Bolt.com has one of the SEO-driven names for their Barbie doll with pink and kitchen and for girls and all the stuff attached. Horrible. Also try to convince backend, can you please figure out like a shorter name that people can speak? And if not, you have to make it yourself. Just grab the first word that's actually a word and then just mention that. But backend can help you a lot as well. Fellow developers, we like this. Share the fun. It's not just you. It's not just all of you making small incremental changes, which is fine and it's great. But make sure that everyone gets to join in. If you fixed something, if you found something, don't just keep it to yourself or just for your pull request buddy, but tell other people, tell someone that you fixed this weird accessibility bug that you found. Or grab someone, ask them, hey, how would you pronounce this if you couldn't use the app itself? How would you? I have no idea how to fix this button. Why is it not getting a trait? Get someone to pair with you and explain to them what the problem is, and they can try to help you solve it. And that way, start creating a little bit of bigger culture around accessibility. Grab your Android folks, see if you can achieve parity. Things like those. Automation. Management loves pipelines. If it's green, it's good. So you can start automating things. I can promise you this will not become green, but it will give you at least a baseline. So you can have a baseline of Xcode that is performing an accessibility audit. It will find all kinds of issues, many of which are false positives or are just weird. But it will also find actual issues. So for example, this contrast field. We're not entirely sure yet if this is an actual contrast issue, because it's also a disabled button. But it's found that and is trying to warn us, hey, this gray on gray text may be very bad for some users. And this is a good thing. This is a good thing to know. And Xcode also allows you to skip certain checks and certain tests once you found all the false positives. So you can still get your nice green check mark for the pipeline. And if you want this on Android as well, on web as well, try finding tools that do this as well. Because, for example, Abra.ai, I mentioned Abra before. They're making a tool currently that checks, that basically perform the same check. They also have a couple of additional own rules that they put in there. But the nice part is that they make a report, and they also do Android. They also do web. So you can have all the same type of reports together, which means that you have like only one report that you can check instead of 3 different types of reports, which is very nice. Assemble an A-team. once you get tired of doing it on your own, get some like-minded people, create a guild, a workforce, a task force, an investigation group, whatever management wants to call it. But try to create a group with people, try to get together regularly, one day every 2 weeks, get a lunch together, start fixing issues or start asking each other questions. The important part here is not that you actually fix your issues or other people's issues, but that you start creating knowledge, creating articles, creating presentations, that you create opportunities to teach the rest of the company with the people that really, really want this. And most importantly, who has a guess? What, most importantly, what was the most important thing that you have to talk about? I like this. This is the second time I hear this. But, yes, I heard it in the back. Actually talk with people that have disabilities. Talk with the people that we're doing this for. This is important because they always come up with insights that you do not get from somewhere else. So, and you have to do this continuously. Try to get some kind of system in there. Make sure, approach organizations that can help you get into contact with it so you are not the raving lunatic that is accosting everyone that has a wheelchair. But approach organizations, try to get them into your focus groups of the company. Hey, can you achieve this task in our app? You are using my app. Can you help me test the app because we're trying to improve it for you? Invite them to test flight. Make sure they get their issues early so that you can fix them before they reach all the other people. And if it's very possible, HR always has a strong how do you call it, problem with this. But try to hire disabled developers. How do you reach these disabled developers? Same organizations. Grab an organization that caters to some kind of group with disabilities and give them the vacancies. Just actively give those people vacancies. And suddenly you will have more disabled people apply for them. Because currently they're just dependent on very, very weird job websites that also have very, very bad accessibility. Thank you all for listening. Not sure how long this was, but time for questions?
As I have the microphone, I can do the first question. I was wondering, does localization also fall under accessibility? If your app is only in English, will it fail a Dutch test or a German or a French or a Croatian?
No.
Cool.
One thing that maybe didn't fit, maybe I didn't mention, the fun part about accessibility is not adding information. And other good languages can't. Localizing your app is inclusivity. It's making sure everyone else also gets to use it. Where accessibility is making sure everyone gets to use it, so basically. Okay. And not adding information also means, fun one for everyone, don't add information in your accessibility code. If your accessibility code is suddenly providing way more information than is on screen, you're also doing something wrong. But I like the question, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Here.
Do I have to push it?
You have to eat it.
Just talk into it. It's a microphone.
No, here.
Hello, testing. Well, I'm trying to figure out, for example, if I'm making a designer app, for example, a graphics editor, how accessible is that supposed to be? Because I expect people, at least are able to use arms. I think. I'm not sure. How does this work?
Well, first off, it works. But indeed, you are correct. You're picking like a very, very hard problem. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with making things like a graphics editor accessible? I cannot give you any other answer than lots of hard work and lots of testing.
But is that supposed... say I started an app now. Am I supposed to, does it have to be accessible for all people by
Well,
2000, by next year, or?
no,
are there
no,
some
no, no.
exemptions?
If you are just starting your indie app and your user base is probably less than 10, less than 100, less than 1,000, you don't count for the law. I mean, the law still exists, but you're not going to be one of the people audited for it. But for example, Adobe stands a very high chance of being audited for this stuff. So
What are they going to do?
make their app accessible, hopefully. I mean, there's lots of talk about people without use of their arms using Krita for making beautiful art. So, but Krita puts effort into this.
Interesting. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I have two questions. One of them is, for example, if you start like working on accessibility and making things accessible, it's quite easy to make, for example, the mistake to change the first accessibility element because you think as a user instead of a disabled person. And I'm wondering what is your workflow into getting your first source of truth, because I think we lack a little bit of documentation on how an accessibility user really works. And my second question is, what do you think about disabling or hiding certain information within your app for accessibility users? For example, making the choice of not displaying a video.
Okay. So the second one is easier. This will fill you the audit because you're withholding information from a disabled group. And that's always a no-go in accessibility's case. So you can change it to help accommodate users. I mean, this happens often with large text. You can switch from horizontal to vertical, and it will become better. But outright not showing stuff to people is always a bad thing. As for the second question, do you mean like the order of things, focus orders? What?
For example, in my case, we had our PO asking about changing the first accessibility element to a certain element in the screen, which was in the middle. But after doing some extensive research, I found out that you should never change the order of accessibility elements because the back button is the first thing you want to tell the user where it is.
Yes, you are correct. One of the things that is key in accessibility is also predictability.
Yeah.
Now, iOS itself is not very good at this. For some reason, it switches around where it wants to start, whether it's on the first header element or the back button. But you should generally try, unless it's very, very important, to not touch the, well, yeah, indeed, the order that you get into when the screen shows. Exceptions to this are, for example, people often focus on text field to facilitate easy typing, fast typing. Yes, very much do that. It'll be fine. And then your manager will ask you, but now people don't hear what that is about. It doesn't matter. If it's an important flow, they will come across it often, they will learn. And if it's their first time and they're confused, they go one step back. Here, oh, this is the name field. And then go back and then type in their name. It'll be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Any last question? No?
Yes, there.
Yeah, I have one question, maybe a bit weird. For example, imagine you have a application which implements server-driven UI,
Yes.
and with dynamic UI, like many different components. Where would you put responsibility for accessibility, to the backend side or to the app side?
Well, both, obviously, but that is a good one. I think the biggest part of the responsibility still lies with basically with the front end. I mean, the front end interprets the back end and knows what is happening. So it knows this is a button, so it has to have a button trait. It knows this button will navigate to something else. So it has to create a new screen with elements that are properly laid out. Where the backend gets a responsibility is when, if you get at the point that you are doing server-driven UI, then your backend also knows what the UI is going to be. They don't have the excuse that they don't know what's happening. So they are suddenly responsible for stuff like shorten names for input labels. Focus orders are suddenly their problem as well. So they have to think about that and try to accommodate the front-end developer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno.
Thank
and
you
then
again.
we'll have a 15-minute break, I think. About 15 minutes, and after that, Tom Lock, of course, will pick up the next presentation. Thank you.